Super Bowl champions.
The swing of the miss, struck him out. The Philadelphia Phillies are 2008 World Champions of Baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. The Flyers win the Stanley Cup. For the lead. Yes!
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his ankles and got all the way to the cup.
Welcome in. It is Saturday morning. We needed 2 weeks to kind of touch this topic, but listen, we're having, we're drunk on the court this morning. Mark, thank you for stopping in.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to be on a different track this summer.
Yeah.
But listen, I will be fully transparent. That game kind of broke my sports spirit for like about a week. I never would have, and I was talking with Mike about this on Monday night. Never would I have ever thought that in a game, it's the first time ever for me in a game 7 against the rival Celtics, that I thought I would have, if you would have told me that I would have turned the game off in the middle of the third quarter, I never would have thought I would have ever been in that position. And to me, that I turned the game off. And if you remember, right at that point, the Phillies are on the West Coast, so their games aren't coming on until 10 o'clock at night.
Mm-hmm.
I literally just checked out of sports for like a week.
Yeah.
I wasn't listening to anything on the radio. Wasn't watching Sports Center. Like I literally, I got into what did I get into? I was listening to the guy that produces all the music for Charlie Brown.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, right? Vince Guaraldi. I got deep into the Vince Guaraldi catalog because there was no words. It was just like I just needed to like completely separate, because consider it wasn't for me. It wasn't just this season. It was like the last 10 seasons. And for me, to have that kind of performance in a game 7, just it broke the sports spirit, man.
Yeah, it really did. That game 7 was, I actually was on the other end of that pendulum.
Okay.
I was like, well, let me see how bad this gets, because I was like, surely they're not gonna lay down like some dogs here.
Mm-hmm.
and in games, and that's exactly what they did. And I think you and Mike had discussed it on the Fired Up show.
Mm-hmm.
That there was a game 7, but that series was over in game 6. And
100%.
that fourth quarter, and I'm a big boxing fan, right?
Okay.
And this past weekend, last weekend, I watched Devin Haney and Vasily Lomachenko fight for undisputed world lightweight championship. And a lot of people felt that Lomachenko won that fight. And especially through rounds 10 through 12, the championship rounds, as they say, he was like really like, it felt like Haney was retreating in that fight. It felt like Lomachenko was firmly in control, and it just felt actually there was a couple of moments where it actually felt like Lomachenko was gonna put him on the canvas there.
Right.
And the fight went to the scorecards, and the champion, he retained the belt, and there was a lot of ensuing like discussion about that. But one of the things they said post fight, Max Kellerman and all from ESPN, they're a part of that top ranked boxing crew. They do all those top fights. And one of the things he said was that Haney won the fight on the cards, but Lomachenko won the story of the fight. And if I go back to game 6 for the Sixers and the Celtics, the story of the fight for the Sixers and the Celtics was, oh my God, like they're going to go out and Tatum's going to be this bad
Mm-hmm.
because he was so bad for the first 3 quarters. Ice cold. I mean, just couldn't buy a bucket.
At that point, 1 of 14.
1 of 14. 1
And
of 14 for one of the best players in the game.
And he's hot and right, and he's shown you how hot and cold he can be in this, you know, in the Celtics Heat series, right? That I saw the stat I saw game 1 and game 3, he doesn't take a shot in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
In game 2, he's 0 of 3, 4, 5, something like that.
Yeah.
But to me, for him to have the confidence to be able to rise up in Embiid's face, in front of the Sixers bench, going at that point 1 of 14, and he hit that shot and it was over.
Yeah,
it was over because then the next 2-3 possessions he comes down, hits more threes. They go from up 2 to down 6 in like under a minute.
Yeah, and everything's there for the Sixers to, you know, exercise their demons and put this thing away. And their arch nemesis in the Celtics, you know, not just in recent years, you know, a storied history between the Sixers and Celtics. And this was an opportunity to, you know, put this thing away. And then the second the series was going back to Boston, I mean, and the Sixers had won there throughout this series.
They won there without Embiid.
Without Embiid, without the MVP of the league. You know, he's not there. And
none of it made sense.
No.
And that's where I think this fan base, I think that's where the frustration lies, right? Is that you had, you know, I mean, not for nothing, but like a guy, like what was it in game 6? Who's the guy that they bring? There was a guy that they were bringing off the bench, Williams, right? They bring him into the starting lineup in game 6. And pair him on the same court with Al Horford. And Doc Rivers had no answer for it.
No.
Like that guy, that caliber of player should not throw your world upside down. And you don't have an answer for him the entire game.
Yeah.
Like they have, I mean, probably one of the deepest coaching rosters, right? With Sam Cassell and Dave Yeager and the 47 other guys that they pay to sit in the 3 rows behind the bench.
Yeah.
And you got nothing out of it. You not a single person on that bench came up with an idea to counterbalance.
Yeah.
Robert Williams.
Yeah.
Like that's the guy that changed the series.
Yeah.
It just, which is why I think the whole perspective, and we'll talk about coaching options in a little bit, but like,
sure.
That to me is where there needs to be a shift in the mindset.
Sure.
Because this process has kind of exhausted itself, right? Yeah. I as much as Joel Embiid uses that as the moniker for his, you know, alter ego, I think that process has to die. Yeah. That needs to be put to bed, because the window that you have with Embiid in his prime is closing. And I don't want Embiid, right? Because this is a star-driven league. I don't want Embiid to get to the point where he's checked out and he's going.
Yeah. I think you froze there, Don.
Got me?
I didn't hear that last part, but
so like you don't want Embiid to check out.
Right. Of course.
You don't want him to check out. You don't want to be in a position where he's requesting the trade because you're back in that same loop all over again.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And as you said, it's a star-driven league, and that has to happen. That has to be in mind for this summer. I wrote about some of these things for the website about.
Yep.
Yeah, about the recently I had a piece come out for Fired Up Sports at firedupsports.com. That's a shameless plug there for everybody. Come check out.
Not a shameless. It's the network, brother.
And you know, I wrote about it, and it was about this whole perception and idea that the Sixers may have a culture problem. And I go back to, I can't remember what game it was. Maybe you could let me know if you remember. Remember one of these games, they had an inside the huddle where they had like the microphone in there,
Yeah.
and
Talk about that.
Doc is in there, and there's a you see those all the time in the NBA. They've been doing those. It's actually a really cool, unique way to pull you into a game in a perspective that we don't often see, you know, like and Doc is in the huddle, and I can't remember I wish I could remember what game it was, but
I think it was definitely a home game.
it was a home game.
It was that it was early. I want to say, and I'm gonna make I think it was game 4.
Game 4, and he's in there, and if you remember, he's like, there's a difference between being like going in there and you being hot and being like, this is unacceptable, everybody pick it up, you know, we're a better group than this, we're deeper, we're more talented, whatever you're telling them. And it more or less felt like Doc was pleading with them, come on guys, like, and that was a bad sign for me, you know, in that moment, even though the Sixers had after that grabbed the stranglehold on the series. They had a chance to close it out at home. Really all the things that you want, you know, in a series. You don't want to have to go on the road for, you know, game 7s are unpredictable.
Right.
You don't want to have to go in the enemy territory to do that, regardless of how much success or lack thereof you've had there recently. And, you know, just, and then like in post, Tatum telling everybody after that performance that he had,
right,
like, hey, I'm one of the best players in the game. And you're, and like, there's just, I would, and it sounds silly because Joel just won MVP and he was, you know, this, I don't want to take anything away from the individual excellence of the year he just had.
Okay.
But it was just like, you know, it's a mentality thing, you know, and to be that bad in that game and just have just no unwavering confidence in your ability to keep shooting and that they'll fall and your season's on the line. And he does it. And then, you know, I think about like, you know, all the great ones have that. You know, I always think of, you know, any, you know, go through, you know, YouTube highlights, go back and look at any Jordan highlight or anything like that.
All right, listen, I'm gonna reference something I just got around to watching this week.
Sure.
Have you seen the Redeem Team documentary on Netflix?
Oh no, I haven't.
All right, so that's something you're gonna want to invest like an hour and a half in.
Yeah.
Because it goes through that whole process of, you know, post-Olympic success where they're just running through teams. They have that stretch where they lose, you know, and end up with, you know, it's that team with Carmelo and LeBron, like early LeBron, like year 2 NBA, Allen Iverson, and they end up getting the bronze.
Yeah.
And so they go through that whole process, right? They revamp the Olympics, but they end up with Kobe Bryant on that team later on in the process. And there's a one of the early games in that pool play where they're playing Spain. And if you remember, Pau Gasol is his Lakers teammate at that time. Kobe Bryant says in the huddle, right? He predicts the play, right? Tells them like exactly what they're going to do. It plays out exactly like that. They're on defense. Pau Gasol is going to set a pick, you know, right at the top of the key. And he goes, I'm going to run right through his chest. And this is this is like seconds into the first game.
Yeah.
And they're all looking at him going, he's fucking crazy. Like, this is his dude. This is the guy he battles with all season long. And now he's talking. He goes,
and they were good friends. Like they
were like best of friends. And he goes, I'm gonna run through his chest. And Mark, I'll be damned. the play happens, right? This Pau Gasol comes up to the top of the key, goes to set this screen, and he like shoulder right into his chest, runs right through him, takes the foul. And you saw like all the guys on the bench, their like eyes are they're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
He fucking did it. Like they thought like he's not gonna do that. That's his dude.
Yeah.
And it literally shifted the entire mentality of that team that if he's going to do that, then we all have to step up our game.
Yeah.
And when I saw that this week, I was like, that's what we're missing.
Yeah.
There was nobody, there's no killer. The killer that should be on his team is in Miami.
Right.
In Jimmy Butler. Right.
Yeah.
And that whole scenario of, them, letting Brett Brown do whatever he did. And, the whole, Ben Simmons debacle of whatever happened with him.
Sure.
And the guy that you needed, the guy who's the killer, left.
Yeah.
Got traded for Josh Richardson.
Yeah.
It just, there's nobody on that team. And that's where I think that's what this team is lacking.
Yeah.
Because, you look at Jaylen Brown, you look at Jason Tatum, right? You look at Jimmy Butler. Those guys are guys that, and Jimmy Butler's done it throughout this entire set of playoffs where he's literally just said, like, I'm the best dude on this court. You're not going to tell me otherwise. And I'm going to show you every time I come down. That's why I think for me, the series that's going on right now, I think that series ends tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know Boston's got a really good. They're 4-1 in their last 5 playoff games in Miami.
Right.
I don't think Jimmy Butler lets this thing go back to Boston. I think he's putting up like a 40-50 spot tonight.
I wouldn't doubt it. He's
me over.
He's at a point, I think, where, in his game, like he's a good example. Jimmy's a good example of, player development's not always linear.
Wow.
Like he's older now, and he's a totally different player than he was. I think back to the Minnesota days or the Chicago days. I mean, like this is not even the same guy, but there's like this level of work ethic and commitment there. And I go back to the 2019 series, I believe it was, with Toronto, and Kawhi hitting that crazy jumper in the corner.
Yeah.
And that play is what gets replayed over and over again because it was incredible. But the Sixers lost that game 7 in the final 2 minutes of that game. I believe they had like a couple there was a couple like shot clock violations for them. And I remember just this like deer in the headlights look that some of these guys had. And at that team at that time, I think we desperately missed Jimmy's, like he was the adult in the room. Like there was like that moment where everybody's got this deer in the headlights look, and he's like, everybody get the hell away from me. Give me the ball. And, your best player doesn't have to be your best leader, and it has to come from somewhere. Like I like the fact that, even though he's a little bit older now, like that they have PJ Tucker. I think Tucker has a little bit of that. But they clearly need more. Like it isn't just about talent for the Sixers, because the Sixers have guys that can score, that can get buckets and things like that. It's really it's a mentality thing. It's a commitment to like, hey, I'm not letting us go out like this.
Right. And I think like when I saw like you spoke about the stuff in the huddle with Doc Rivers.
Yeah.
I think now I realize why Doc Rivers struggles in these like crucial game 6, game 7, these closeout games. Outside of the one, team that he has in Boston with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and Rajon Rondo and that right elite group of talent, he has really struggled. And the stuff that I heard in the huddle wasn't a lot of strategic stuff.
No.
It was a lot of like rah-rah, like, come on, guys, are we really going to do this? Can we do it? It wasn't like, because in the couple of games that I've checked in this Boston Miami series, right? You hear Spoelstra he's the for me, he's the barometer,
Oh,
right? Because
absolutely.
this will now be, I got 5 or 6 teams that he's taken to the finals.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm listening to him have those conversations in the huddle, and it's all strategic.
Yeah.
It's these short bursts of like, all right, if this happens, we do this. If this happens, you go here. If this happens, we go here. I look at that and I'm like, that's the barometer.
Yeah.
That's the type of conversation that I need happening. Not like, come on, guys, are we really going to do this? We're really going to let this happen? What are we doing here? Like, it was, and it didn't dawn on me until you just said that, when I was like, like the conversations in the huddle are like kind of, they're fluff.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really just, it feels like, you know, you're like, when it comes across like that and you're in that situation, and we're going to get into the off season later in the show, but this is very much a fork in the road moment for the Sixers.
100%.
Like you said, Embiid's at the apex of his game. We don't know how much longer we're going to get this elite Embiid, especially when you consider his injury history and all those other things and how big men age and all that stuff.
Right.
But we just don't know. And, you know, like, to come across in like you mentioned about Spoelstra and you know, we in basketball circles, right? You hear a lot about heat culture, and like that's from the top down, right? Pat Riley's there, and you know, this guy, years and years, right? He's like this mythic basketball figure, and he just like this guy knows how to win. And then, like, I mean, I know in this city, it's one thing when it happens in Miami, but people would love it. We would be talking about it forever, especially if the Sixers were in a position where they had a chance to compete for a championship.
Right.
If you go back, when you look at, I believe earlier this year, Spoelstra and Butler had like a pull apart.
Yeah.
And it's just like Spoelstra doesn't let anybody off the hook. He's
Nope.
very much, you know, and remember, if you go back even further than that, in the LeBron, Wade, Bosh days, a lot of people felt like he was the weak link in that. Well, they have all this talent, but this guy's just not, you know, he's just not on the level with them. And, you know, now you look at it's like Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and a bunch of overachieving guys.
Wow. Yeah, you're right.
And I mean that in the most endearing way possible.
And they're down a couple guys too.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, you look at these guys like Strus, Gabe Vincent, like these guys they're like,
you're getting contributions from up and down the roster. You're getting contributions from guys that you wouldn't think would normally be effective players in tough spots.
Sure.
Right. And like I said, you're down, right? Oladipo gets hurt early in the playoffs. Tyler Hero gets hurt. So you're not even pulling your 6-7 guys off the bench. You're pulling 8, 9, 10, and you're getting contributions from them. Yeah. And that's a guy, right? Almost equivalent to like Tortorella, right? You're getting production out of guys that wouldn't normally give you really solid contributions. And that's, I think, what an effective coach does.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and it's kind of like a you know, a squeezed blood out of a stone type of thing.
Yeah, you're right.
And you know, I don't want to take anything away from guys like Vincent and Strus. Like Gabe Vincent, I believe, is a free agent this summer, and he's going to get paid by somebody for what he's produced. Like, you know, I have no idea if he can maintain it somewhere else or outside of that culture there in Miami, but someone's going to take the gamble on it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, his production on the court has at least earned him the right to try to prove that he can do it somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. And
he's a guy that could be, you know, a down the road with this next contract, like a 6th man of the year, or, you know, on maybe like a middle to, you know, end of the standings roster, you know, a guy that could slot into a starting lineup spot.
Sure.
I think at the end of the day, the way that this Celtics series played out, it's just maddening, and it's just frustrating because it's like, if there was ever a playoff scenario that played out exactly the way that would pave the lane for them to have the easiest road possible, right? The Bucks get knocked out early, right? So you're not going to play them, right? The Heat are taking out anybody and everybody in their way.
Yeah.
You would have matched up against the Heat, which would have been the 8 seed.
Yeah.
And you squander it. And that's and I think you're going to look back out of all these playoff runs that have ended in the second round, even with the Hawks, right? The Hawks series that ends the way that does, I think this one, the Kawhi shot, right? That ends that series. I think this one hurts kind of the most because it's the one that got away that you let slip away.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think, and then to come in and then just to come out with that performance in a game 7. And, I'm at a point too, where I have no idea as far as like, when things end like that, it's always like, I hear a lot of people online and things like that. They talk about and you started our show with this about like the trust the process stuff and oh, let's stop talking about this or whatever. But when series like this happen, you go back through the years, like with the fine tooth comb, and look at, all the things that they did, or maybe they shouldn't have done, or, hey, we should have gotten this guy instead, or,
Right.
maybe we shouldn't have handed out that contract to Tobias Harris. And I certainly know Jimmy Butler hasn't forgotten it. It's just like, you go through all those things, especially when, a series, it's one thing to lose, but it's kind of like the Dennis Green thing, we know who, we let him off the hook, and it's, we knew who they were, like we knew who
they are who we thought they were.
Yeah, exactly.
And we let them off the hook.
And that's kind of like, but I can assure you that this summer, for the Sixers, from Morey right on down, no one's getting let off the hook this summer for how this went. And I wrote about this for the website, but it's like really one of these things where, this offseason's pivotal for what is to come for, whether or not this team's going to be able to get over the hump and get in the championship contention. And then it's going to be a really interesting one. I think, like, as far as like, I look at the James Harden situation, and I'm ready to drop every breakup line on James Harden, and it's not you, it's me. Let's see other people. It's like, let's stay friends, but like, over there at Houston,
my God. That's listen, we'll take a commercial break. We'll come back, we'll talk coaching, and we'll talk some off-season moves.
Let's do it.
Von C. Brewing Company is a 20-barrel, 16,000 square foot microbrewery with a 2,500 square foot tasting room, including a spacious outside beer gardens in Norristown, PA, in the heart of Montgomery County. The Von C. family is part of the family that started C. Schmidt and Son Brewing in 1860. Stop in Wednesday through Sunday and taste a variety of draft and 16-ounce cans of originally brewed beer and tell them the Drunk on Broad crew sent you. Von C. Brewing is located at 1210 Stenbridge Street, Suite 300 in Norristown. Cheers.
Team Clicks are the only glasses for real sports fans. With interchangeable arms, you can support all of your favorite teams, or even make and create custom options as well. These die-hard sports fans have realized that sports fans needed something other than face paint to show their love and passion for their teams. Go to teamclicks.com/DOB and show your love for your hometown team.
And La Torin's curated collection of men's and women's watches is a perfect investment that lasts for years to come and fits perfectly with your every outfit and style. Our range of classic watches aren't just a great perfect formal and casual accessory, but a time machine that takes you back to memories. Explore our collection of timeless watches that can reflect your taste, personality, and personal style. Our exclusive collection of carefully curated, affordable luxury watches is what you need to make a personalized style statement. You can take pride in your prized possession, handing it over to the next generations as your most loved asset that they can also own and display with the same pride. These high-quality pieces stand the test of time, giving exceptional value and return on your investment. Go to la-touraine.com and use code DOB at checkout and get 10% off.
If you're looking for unique sports apparel, check out Streaker Sports. They've dug deep into the archives and have brought back some incredible defunct team logos and have even created entire defunct league collections. They also have collections paying homage to sports culture, including the Miracle on Ice, Slap Shot, Caddyshack, the Mighty Ducks, and even have a license with Wiffle Ball and USA Hockey. Only for Drunk on Broad listeners, use code BROAD at checkout to get 10% off anything at streakersports.com. Again, that's 10% off anything at streakersports.com with discount code BROAD.
All right, welcome back. Listen, as heartbreaking as it was to kind of go through that and relive that, right? That series is done. The Celtics Heat series is going to play. They're going to play Game 6 tonight. The Tuesday after that season, after that series ends, Doc Rivers gets the call that he's being relieved of his duties, which I think everybody in the town kind of anticipated that would happen. Wasn't a surprise. Mark, tell me what your thoughts were, about the Doc Rivers firing.
Yeah, I mean, it was really really going back to, I think, last year. It was, Doc had kind of had this, he was on the hot seat. And this year's success or failure was going to depend on, his job was probably always going to play out. His fate, rather, was always going to play out here, depending on the lack of, how things went, the success or failure of this year, how far he could take them. And, I think with Doc, it's like you had kind of said before, and we've said on recent, Drunk on Court shows about, he's over there on the opposite side of it. Mazzulla's over there, very little experience, was not even supposed to be the guy in that spot. And I you can't get you can't get worked as a as a coach by a guy.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to suggest or insinuate that there wasn't adjustments made or anything like that. And ultimately, guys have to go out there and execute. But it's just it goes back to the huddle thing, like we were just talking about, before the commercial, but before our break. It's just you can't be in a huddle as the guy and be pleading with your guys.
Right. At that point,
try.
At that point, you've lost.
Yeah.
Right? That's like pleading with your child to be like, please clean up your room. Please clean up your room. Please, please, come on, please. At some point, you got to kind of lay the hammer down and be like, you either do it or this is the consequence.
Right.
And whether
and they get upset that you yelled at them, after you asked them 10 times.
It was maddening, right? But I think you're not the off-season conversation, right? The rumor mill has already started. You weren't ever going to move Joel Embiid. That kind of, to me, that goes right off the table. The obvious one is what happens, right? The early one that Doc Rivers is going, he's gone. To me, I think the best case scenario for the Sixers in terms of their coaching search happened because of what happened earlier on in the playoffs, which to me was probably out of everything that's transpired this playoffs, that coaching pool is the most surprising thing that transpired more than any other game. The fact that you have, Mike Budenholzer, gets relieved of his duties early with an early exit against Miami.
Yeah.
The fact that, Monty Williams gets relieved of his duties early, as soon as the Suns lose in that series. Nick Nurse is out there. Frank Vogel's out there. There are guys, that have championship caliber experience, guys that have led teams that haven't been necessarily the best team, but led teams to be really successful and kind of push them over the hump of being, a championship caliber team. So there are guys that I like. There are guys that I want no parts of. Talk to me about the guys that you like from the guys that are available.
I think at this point, Nick Nurse would be my top choice, probably.
Mine too.
I believe he's very much a tactician. And I think that going back to some of the things we talked about in the huddle, and you had mentioned that there wasn't a lot of that in those huddles. It was a lot more of like a rah-rah type of thing from Doc. And I think for Nurse, I was very, and still to this day, was very impressed with the job he did in Toronto with that group. I mean, he had Kawhi, and Kawhi was and is a special talent. But I mean, like, you go back and you look at that 2019 roster and that team, like, he had, he played 7 guys that run. And
I mean, you got, just to read that roster off, right? You had Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam. You had Green, Kawhi Leonard, and Gasol, right? And then you had Serge Ibaka and Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, those were the guys that played. I mean,
those were the guys that played. They played, and you got maximum effort out of those guys. And I think after that series happened, the thing that I was looking at was like, why did we have as many guys? Why did we play as many guys as we did? But I looked at Nick Nurse and I looked at the guys, and he said, I'm going to ride or die with my guys. And these are the 7 guys that are going to win me a game. And I think, that's the kind of thing. That's why for me, I'm on the same boat. Nick Nurse is the guy that I want. I think that he can generate an offense around Joel Embiid, identifying him as the best player on the court and figure out ways to get him in position to be even better than he already is.
Yeah. And I think, when it comes to the Nurse thing, and you were just reading off those guys there, and him and Nurse kind of riding or dying with those guys, that institutes, I believe, a level of accountability that we haven't had here. And it's like, not only are you put your faith in these guys, and I'm sure that helps them rise to the occasion because you're saying, hey, look, I believe in you. Right. But you're also saying, hey, look, if this goes the other way, this is on you guys. And
you're right.
I think about, I don't want to take anything away from the job Budenholzer did, Coach Bud did in Milwaukee, because I think he did a good job. But I kind of look at him in the same vein as I look at Doc, where he's not really the type of coach. Like, you don't see Bud make a lot of changes in game. Like, okay. I don't think he's an adjustments guy. I think of Nurse more as a tactician, where, get timeout and he's looking for the assistant, like, give me this whiteboard,
Right.
And he's out there drawing things up. And I think there's like a level of grit that comes with him too, that the city will really resonate with Nick Nurse. And as far as I like Monty Williams too. I think you got a raw deal in Phoenix.
Those are my 1, 2. So we're kind of on the same page.
I like Monty Williams as well. Vogel's not really. I know that I believe it was reported recently that he did have an interview with the team.
Yeah, early last week, I think, Nick Nurse was in first. But then Frank Vogel, who's a local guy, right? Grew up in Ocean City.
Mm-hmm.
had some success in LA before they decide to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
I don't hate it, but I don't love it. He's not like he for me is like fourth on the list.
Yeah.
The guy that I don't want, there are two guys actually that I'm kind of like, please, like, let's not get to the point where we consider those guys. The first guy is D'Antoni, because I think if Mike D'Antoni comes and is the coach here, I think that increases the likelihood that James Harden is here. And if James Harden is looking at getting the contract that he's looking for, which is that 4-year, $200 million contract, that to me is enough incentive to avoid having Mike D'Antoni here. Because that contract, if you thought you saw playoff James Harden now, think about what version of that you're going to see 4 years from now.
Right.
And you're still going to be paying him $50 million a year.
Right.
I think you would look back at that contract the same way we're looking back at that Tobias contract right now.
Yeah.
I think you would look back at that even a year from now and be like, what the hell did we get ourselves into?
Right.
And the other guy for me, is Sam Cassell. I think he's too close.
Yeah.
It's too close because he has been with Doc Rivers for the last 8-9 years as an assistant.
He's been there. He's been with him a long time. Yeah.
I don't feel like there's enough shift in what he would do versus what Doc Rivers would do. Not to say that he would do a bad job. And listen, if he is hired and he does a great job and it is a completely different mindset, I'll be the first person to admit, and I would love to do that and be wrong. But if I'm looking at the guys that are available, he's not high on my list because it's like he's collateral damage. Right? He's too close to the situation and the way that the situation played out here.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Sam is, it is too close, and I think if you identify one of the issues with and how you want to navigate this offseason and such, I think if you're looking for a culture shift, Sam can't be an option for you.
Yeah.
You want to kind of sever ties to the previous regime. One guy that I don't know that he's been mentioned, but that I actually like. I don't know that he's, like I said, I don't think he's been mentioned, but one of the guys that I've always kind of respected the way he kind of went about it was Tyronn Lue as an option. I don't know that the Sixers are really interested. There hasn't been anything reported about him, I don't believe. But he's another one. No, I mean, like, there's a level of like, again, and I like the fact that he's one of those guys where, like Doc's a former player, right? But he played in the NBA in a different era, and I think Lue's a little bit more closer. Like Lue played against guys that a lot of the current players looked up to, so there's like this level of I think like understanding there, even if it's like this unspoken thing, like, hey, I kind of get you. I know what you're going through.
Okay.
And then, like, I believe he's, I'm sure there are people out there that know much more about him than I do, but there's, I believe he's like, he isn't immune to adjustments or anything like that. Like, he's usually pretty quick to make those changes and things like that. So
I like that.
He's not somebody that's out there, like rumored to be out there, but I've always liked him,
I'm going to throw another name at you. From a team that we've talked a little bit about today. There's a little bit of buzz about Chris Quinn, right? Who's the first assistant on the Miami Heat.
Yeah.
A guy who's been around, he's been around Spoelstra for, this is his 9th season as the assistant coach in Miami.
Yeah.
So I don't hate the idea of going to that tree of coaches.
Yeah.
With a guy who has spent a lot of time with, what you could argue might be the most successful coach in the NBA in the last decade. And it's a guy that no one's really talking about, right? But listen, if you're hanging around, Spoelstra and you're hanging around Pat Riley for the last better part, what amounts to the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
The only thing that worries me about going that route is that this team needs the guy that's going to push them over the edge.
Right.
And I don't know that he could be that guy in what would be your initial, deep dive into being a head coach.
Right. And he would have to be, right out of the chute, like probably one of like, you're looking at him and you're like, we'd have to know, the Sixers would probably have to identify early on, like, oh wow, he's going to be one of the next great ones. You know what I mean?
Right.
And there might be a little bit of foresight there. I mean, like you said, like being around Spoelstra and Riley, I mean, you would imagine you would learn things about basketball by accident, even when you're not trying to. You're like, oh, I never thought about it like that.
Right.
You're just on the charter to the next city and you're listening to these guys chat hoops. You're like, man, like, and it's that's interesting. I haven't heard that about Quinn, but
it's somebody that nobody's talking about that.
Yeah.
But when you look at the outside of the lack of coaching experience, it's a guy that makes a lot of sense in terms of being around the right people and developing a mindset that is, again, heat culture, bringing some version of that to this organization. And listen, if they're, look no further than the Celtics, right? They're having a lot of success with a coach who's young and didn't have any experience in head coaching before this year.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of a precedent for it, but on the overall, I think, the likelihood that he becomes a legit candidate is probably low, but it just, to me, it's a guy that may make a little bit of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could. And I think like, grabbing a little bit of piece of that culture, could be a good thing. The Sixers seem somewhat, Morey spoke not that long ago, a couple weeks ago, maybe, about, like a end of season presser type of thing. And I think one of the things, it kind of sounds like the Sixers are looking for experience. I'm not, it's really not one of those things for me where I can understand why they would want that, but it's not a prerequisite for me. If you come in and you're like, wow, this guy really has a really interesting perspective, and you're able to, you're able to grab a little bit of, a piece of that heat culture, and like hiring the best guy doesn't mean the most experienced guy. And, I hope, that they're casting a wide net with it. I mean, everybody that has been rumored to be available all kind of fits in the same column of like, they all have experience.
Right.
But I mean, like for me, it wouldn't really necessarily be a prerequisite. And then it's really about, again, one of the things I wrote about for the site recently was that it's about like really, I don't think it's about talent this summer for the Sixers. Sixers have talent. They have the reigning MVP of the league.
Right.
It's not about talent. It's about fit. It's about how, these guys kind of mesh in the room and on the floor.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah,
like
I think you're right.
That fit has to matter as well.
So if you look at, the off season, right, everything that we've heard up until this point is that James Harden is kind of on the fast track back to Houston, which, for family reasons, he's got a lot of family that still live in Houston. He's got the organization that still loves him.
Sure.
And, if he's going to go there and get the 4-year, $200 million contract, like I go ahead.
Yeah.
I don't think we saw what everybody warned us about with playoff Harden.
Yeah.
We got that firsthand, right? You saw It was either feast or famine. It was, either put up 45 or, not put up a shot in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So to me, I think you know, and it's hard to say that for a guy that led the league in assists this year,
Mhm.
and at times looked really good. But then when you needed him the most is when he showed when you essentially couldn't find him at all.
No.
So he's a guy that I want to, and you had spoke about earlier, right? Move on from him, which opens up, a large portion of salary that, I don't know about you, but I think, there are two places where this team needs to invest, which is, point guard and some kind of scoring athletic wing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I would preferably like to have, bring in a guard that has kind of like some of that combo ability, guard the perimeter a little bit. And maybe not facilitate at the level of like leading the league in assists, but it's just like you have to get something else. I think there are better you can get more bang for your buck with that contract slot opening up and that money.
You can kind of spread it out a little bit.
You could spread it out and kind of keep, it may not be perfect, right? But if you want to keep the pieces of what you do offensively built around the reigning MVP of, in Joel Embiid, a young, talented Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris, it's not perfect, but it's doable. And I think if you have a coach that's able to tie it in a little bit, tie up the loose ends, that could work.
Now, listen, if you bring in a guy like Nick Nurse, do you have interest in a guy like Fred VanVleet?
That would actually be my first choice, I think.
All right.
If I were looking at free agency and the Sixers are able to land Nurse, in addition to just being able to having a player who's not only won before,
right?
He can do a little bit of everything. He can guard. He can guard he can play the perimeter, I think, relatively well. He can score, but I like his off-ball ability, because when you're in an offense with Joel Embiid, you're not going to have the ball a lot. He's going to have the ball.
Right.
So your ability to space and space the floor well and do those other things, I think would be really efficient. Plus, it would be nice to have a player that had previously had success with the guy that you're bringing in, and maybe could kind of be the player liaison between the coach and the team. Like, hey, like, bless you.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And
I tried to hit mute.
So I think having someone like that in here, where like he played for the guy before, they've won a championship together, he can kind of be the player espousing the position of the coach of like, hey, this is what he needs from us, almost like a player coach type of thing.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like,
he would fit really well in the city.
Yeah.
I think that his style of play, and I think it would allow Tyrese Maxey to kind of slot as the off guard.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't necessarily, have the primary responsibility of bringing up the offense and directing the offense. I think that could be beneficial for him, because then that allows him to utilize the athleticism. It allows him to get in space, and the more that he can evolve, and if he can develop that mid-range to outside game the way that he did in the second half of the season, bringing in a guy like that brings in a guy with playoff experience, with championship pedigree, that could be, the distributor that this team needs, without having a guy that's going to demand to dribble the air out of the ball like James Harden.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like, that would be like a priority of mine, I think, when it comes to roster development and configuration.
What about a guy like Jeremy Grant, a former process guy?
Yeah. I actually, my cousin and a friend of mine, they actually had they got season tickets at the very beginning of the process.
Oh, okay.
And
the revolutionaries.
Yeah. And they were invested. My cousin Danny and my buddy Steve, they listen to the show, so
nice.
Just shout them out. And we actually met in a like a meet and greet after a game. We met Jeremy Grant. We have a picture with him. Former process guy for sure, but his game's really evolved, I think, over he got really And he had several stops, right? I think he was in Detroit at one point. There was
Detroit. Okay, I think he was with OKC for a while. Like he bounced around, but he kind of found himself as that athletic wing. Plays defense really well. I think he's a guy I would have interest in.
Sure.
A guy like Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Clarkson, Josh Hart, Kelly Oubre is a guy that, these are guys that you're going to have to, this team has to get fast and athletic and tough on defense. They have guys that can score, but they need those guys that, like, when I look at the roster of like the Bucks, when I look at the guys that the bullets that they're firing off the bench, you need this like next level of guy. Like I don't need Shake Milton. I don't need Furkan Korkmaz. I need the guys that are coming off the bench to be just as young, just as fast, just as athletic. So those are guys that I'm looking at that I'm going, they kind of fit that mold. They're not guys that are going to demand the ball, that are going to require to, they're not guys that are looking to score 35 points a night, but they're guys that can contribute.
Yeah.
So,
and just another like aside about like a guy like Josh Hart, for example, you look around the league and we know that from, being in the area here, these Nova guys, and they're part of this product.
They can play, man.
They can, and they all have like we were talking about heat culture earlier. I mean, you look at the NBA, this Nova culture, that exists around the league. These guys come ready to play, like they're ready. Really, they came through that program with Jay Wright, and like I look at the Knicks acquired, I think, right at the deadline, or Hart at the deadline rather, and he fit there like a glove. And of course, there's the Nova connection with Jalen Brunson, and stuff. And I mean, they're like talented players that don't need the ball in their hands to be effective. And I think the Sixers need that. It's not really about, and that's one thing that I noticed in the playoffs this year, assuming that they have, a high caliber Embiid and such, like,
right.
It's really not about offense for the Sixers. They can create offense. They have guys that can do that. I have faith in their ability to score. It's
absolutely.
It's when it comes to, you look at the amount of wide open threes Boston shot in that second round series and things like that. I need guys that can guard multiple positions, that can contribute a little bit of offense if we need them to do that.
Absolutely.
And guys like Hart, Kelly Oubre Jr. is another one. Like I've always kind of liked his game, and he's
another guy who's had a bunch of different stops, but is a talented athletic wing that can get buckets when he needs to, but can really lock somebody down. The last guy I want to throw you have any interest in a guy like Dylan Brooks? Listen, if you needed a guy to come in and talk a bunch of shit, if you put him and PJ Tucker on the same court at the same time, if they're not going to get into a fight with each other, they're definitely going to get in a fight with somebody on the other team.
They should totally do that. Tucker, let's bring in Pat Bev. Pat
Bev is a guy I love. I love his game.
You want to talk about a guy too, like that just like I can't think of a player that was more made to play here than Pat Bev.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just from a culture standpoint, this guy is just like, and when it comes to the Dylan Brooks thing, I am an ardent, my group texts know this, my group text with my buddies and things like that. I'm an ardent Dylan Brooks supporter.
Oh, okay.
And it goes back to that thing of just like being just like, I think he takes it a little too far, obviously. I love, we were talking about culture. I love what Memphis has not won anything, right? But between Morant and Brooks, like these guys were at one point this year the most hateable group in the league.
Yeah.
And they carry themselves.
Anything, but they walk around like they've won everything.
Yeah. And I just like, and it goes back to that mentality thing. Like you were talking earlier about the Redeem Team documentary And we were talking about Tatum earlier, and to have that performance, which if they don't win that game 6, is like one of the all-time. I mean, geez, like the ball, how different things could be in Boston if they lose that game 6 and Tatum plays that way.
Right.
That's almost assured, I would imagine, that Jaylen Brown's moving on. They're going to figure something else out there, and there's going to be like
Agreed.
some mutiny there with that roster, and there still may be,
Yeah.
depending on if they go out tonight or not. But Brooks is somebody that hit the perception around him, and like I think he was all defense this year.
Yeah,
And
I think he was.
he was all defense this year, but it's like he's going to have to take like this dramatic pay cut because just like nobody likes him. It's like,
Yeah, you're right.
and it's
Yeah.
just like, and maybe that's a learning experience for him.
It could be.
For him,
It could be a maturity thing.
a
So,
maturity thing, or maybe sometimes we see that, right, with guys, and they end up getting somewhere with a coach, and it just meshes. It just
yeah, it
works.
just clicks.
And
Um,
I don't know if Nurse is that guy or not, but for a contract that's not terribly expensive or anything like that, I would imagine at this point I'd probably have some interest if I was the Sixers for a culture fit, and he can contribute. So
Yeah, I think it's gonna be there. Daryl Morey's gonna have to be very creative.
Yeah.
In terms of like, just before we do final thoughts, right? Seth Curry is another guy,
Mhm.
right? That I think, inevitably when you trade the group of guys that they trade away for Ben Simmons, he's probably the best, he's the best guy that they lost in that trade.
Yeah.
Between him, Andre Drummond, and Ben Simmons, right? Seth Curry is probably the guy they missed the most because they kind of chased that, that wing shooter.
Yeah.
But listen, I'm here for it all, right? The Daryl Morey is going to have to be super creative in terms of how he kind of devises this roster. Tobias Harris is a guy we kind of talked about, but do they move on from that? But all that to be discussed when it actually happens.
Yeah.
But all right, let's roll into final thoughts. What do you got? What do you got for final thoughts for today?
Yeah, I think just like to kind of put a bow on this conversation, like with, I look at, when it comes to like additions and things like that, like there's a couple different paths this team can go with this. And I'm more into the culture fit. It doesn't have to be necessarily about, scoring ability or a guy that just, just rack up a bunch of points and get buckets. It's more about like fit, ability to guard multiple positions and switch and defense and those types of things. I think the Sixers could really benefit from having that. And then, of course, like an on-court leader, so to speak. But there's another path, and we didn't discuss this, but I wanted to bring it up today, was the whole Dame Lillard thing. That I think is this, yeah.
Big time.
And he's one of my favorite players in the league. And so I'm clearly biased. I will start with that. And
Okay.
I'm totally biased. But this guy is much like Butler and some of these other guys we've talked about today. Lillard's made of something that I think we wish that more guys today were made of.
I agree.
Of just kind of like this, I'm not going down like this. Like, and he has this ability but nothing that you do there, because the Sixers are in this really, really tough position where they don't have a lot of assets.
Yeah.
And, you'd have to trade for him. But, although it may be unpopular, you have to look at guys who match up with your timeline here on the Embiid timeline.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that don't fit that, although we're all very, very big fans of him, is Tyrese.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would imagine that if you were to call Portland and to start a dialogue there, that conversation would start with him.
I was going to say, yeah, it starts with him.
And it's something the Sixers really, if that scenario were to play out, that's something the Sixers really, really have to think about. Because I know, at least for me, if you win the championship, it's obviously worth it.
Yeah.
But if you get close and you don't, we start to look back at it like it wasn't worth it. But I think given all that this team has been through over the years, process and everything else,
Right.
you owe it to yourself to take the shot, to take the risk.
Yeah.
Because
listen,
it's all about winning the title.
And anytime you get the best player in the trade, you won the trade.
Mhm.
So I think it's definitely a conversation worth having. The thing that I was all on the Dame train for a long time. The thing that makes me hesitant is the thing that he has in common with Bradley Beal, right? Which is that they're loyal to a fault.
Yeah.
They want to stay in the city and they want to be loyal to the city and they want to be loyal to DC and Portland respectively. But they're doing it at the detriment of their career.
Right.
Because their career is essentially in this like static limbo of like being a playoff team, not being consistent, not like it just, so that to me is just, it's the thing that makes me pause to make that investment, not wavering on the quality of the player that I think you would get back. That's the thing that makes me super hesitant. So
sure.
Listen, for final thoughts, I'm going to go in two different directions. One, just a shout out to our friends. We got there's a Fired Up Sports K-Lot tailgate that's happening on June 24th. One of our sister shows, I guess you would say, the Bell Smashers pod. Right, they're partnering with the Carter Hot Media and the Drunk Phils fans to put together the K-Lot tailgate on June 24th. I'm gonna be down there. I was talking with Mike and Tom. We all got some standing room tickets. So if you're down there, stop by the K-Lot. It should be a ton of fun. They're gonna start around 11 to 3 ish. Games at 4. So if you're down and around on the 24th, it's a game against the Mets. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of shit talking back and forth as people are walking by in all their Mets gear. But that should be a good time, and it's a BY whatever you want. So you want to bring food, bring booze, whatever you want to bring. You want to just come and just hang out. But those are all some cool things that we're going to try to start doing. We're going to try to at some point try to connect with the Drunk Phils guys about getting down and doing one of their shows from their. I don't know if you've seen the Drunk Phils fans garage bar.
Yeah.
Which is
that looks so cool, man. Like that looks
cool.
like so much fun.
Shout out to those guys. For my other final thought, right? It's Memorial Day, so anybody who is military affiliated with the military, any branch of the military, shout out to them for making the ultimate sacrifice and making sure that we have the freedom and the opportunities to do kind of whatever we choose to do. And they do it, freely and willingly. So huge thank you to anybody who served in the military this weekend. And not just this weekend, but any weekend, but especially this weekend, they get recognized. So, really appreciate it. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Mark, we'll definitely connect. I know we're going to connect on some with Mike on a hockey drunk on the ice show to kind of talk about the draft. We got some other stuff coming up. Eric and I are going to jump on tomorrow morning to talk some Phils. Wish me luck. Hopefully we get a decent performance this afternoon. But
our only hope right now.
Listen, it's either them or the Union. So listen.
When do the Eagles camps start? Like mini camps and stuff?
Hey, listen, the rookie mini camp, ended right after they had a couple days after the draft, but that stuff will start popping up in at the end of June, early July. I'm sure they'll start having some stuff. So as soon as that stuff starts popping off, man, we'll be back talking birds. Have a good weekend, Philly. Go get outside, go enjoy that weather, and we'll talk to you soon.
Peace.
This is the Broad Street Line, where Philly sports fans leave all of their sports hot takes. Call 267-405-3062 and show us your passion for Philly sports. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday at 8:30 when we listen to your live reactions to the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat.
Iverson, wow, what a fake off Daniels as he broke his